games, people understand that. People use sell driving games, but how exactly do you describe the genre of a game where you're a carpenter trying to shoot an angry gorilla? Oh, and that's something else. You never actually shoot the gorilla. You never hit him with the hammer. You never do anything to Donkey Kong. You merely try to survive and get to the top of the level. The most you do in the fourth game is you hit the rivets on Donkey Kong's platform, which makes him tumble down. But then he goes right back and he grabs Pauline again and does it all over again. Nintendo got $180 million from Donkey Kong in its first year, and that's $1981. So that basically said, okay, we're going to stick with video games for a while. And there's a huge amount more about Donkey Kong and Nintendo, but that's why I wrote the book. But we're talking about other stuff now. Okay, we're going on to 1982. This is the year that E.T. came out, one of the best movies of all time. It's also the year that the E.T. video game came out, one of the worst video games of all time. Basically, here's E.T., and he falls into a hole, and then he very laboriously gets out of the hole, and then he goes to another screen, he falls into another hole. And that's the entirety of the game. You can't blame the designer, Howard Warshaw, because he only had a couple of months to work, and they designed way, way too many cartridges. But they also made way, way too many Pac-Man cartridges. Now, there was some behind-the-scenes stuff going on with Atari. It got sold to a big media company, Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers took all of the guys in jeans making decisions and said, you know what, we're going to have guys in suits making the decisions. These guys in suits make better decisions. Here is one of the decisions that the guys with suits made. They made 12 million copies of Pac-Man. Now, it turns out the Pac-Man game they made was only one level, and it was bad. But the bigger problem is that there were only 10 million Atari 2600s out there. 10 million at 2600s, 12 million copies of Pac-Man, which meant that every single person in the world needed to buy a Pac-Man, and then they needed to sell 2 more million copies of the Atari 2600, and all of those people needed to buy Pac-Man, and then Atari would have broken even. That didn't happen. And they had all these ETs that people didn't buy either, just because it was a bad game. So, here's an urban legend that I'm happy to say is actually true. They took all these ETs, they took the Pac-Mans, they went to a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. They dug a big trench. They filled the trench with these video games. And then they were so scared that someone would come and trash pick and take some money out of Atari's pocket. They steamrolled all of the games to break the cartridges. And then they poured cement over the whole thing. And that's how bad Atari had it. That's what they had to do because these games are so toxic. The game of the year for 1982, though, can't be E.T. It has to be Pole Position. Pole Position it's okay now to play, but it was revolutionary back then. Because there had been driving games, but none of them looked like you were actually driving a car. This one put you not behind the wheel, but behind the fender of the car, which is now the standard way that most people play driving games. It was the first game that tried for more realistic physics. So you could overturn, you could spin out, things like that. Anyone who's ever played a Gran Turismo game has pole position to thank for it. Okay, we're moving up to 1983. This was the year of the first OVA, Dalos. This was also the year that War Games came out. If you've ever seen that 80s classic. This is the year that the Game Link came out. Game Link was a system that let you have modem support for your Atari 2600. You dialed the number, and then you downloaded the game, and then you played it, and it cost like $10. It wasn't that good of a concept, but Game Link stuck around, changed its name 1 or 2 times, and became America Online. And America Online actually got its start as a modem provider for the Atari 2600. The game of the year for 1983, though, is Star Wars. Has anyone ever seen the old Star Wars game, like at Barcade or something like that? Yes. It's amazing. Now, they use vector graphics, which hardly anyone uses nowadays. Vector graphics, fancily, is a way that makes it look like everything is lasers. So it looks very much like Tron, which is another vector graphics game. So you have all these wireframe models floating all around. And now, 1983 was not the year Star Wars came out, but Star Wars showed that you could actually take an existing film property and make a video game out of it, and people who loved the game would buy it, and people who loved the movie would buy it, so you had twice the audience. And nowadays, if you go into a video game store, it's very hard to find something that doesn't have that crossover potential, that's not already a book series, or a movie series, or a TV show, or all three at the same time. I mean, can anyone name like a freestanding gaming property? Maybe Shrek?
Yeah.
Well, Shrek is a perfect example. Shrek was a movie, and then there is a soundtrack to it, there's a video game to it.
Twilight. Kingdom Hearts.
Twilight, Kingdom Hearts. Well, Kingdom Hearts is like 2 franchises because you're pulling from a Final Fantasy and the Disney group.
Zelda. What about Halo?
Halo, good. But Halo has now become its own genre. Right. There's now books and video games for Halo, so...
Well, it was neither a movie nor a book.
League of Legends. Right,
yes. I may have stepped too far into that category because everyone has their own answer. So I'm going to see that maybe there are gaming franchises that are standing on their own. Okay, we're going up to
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I prefer the Turtles of Mario. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going up to 1984. This is the year of Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. This is the year that Cloak and Dagger came out, which focused on a video game. No one remembers that. It was also the year of The Last Starfighter, which has one of the greatest concepts for video games. A guy who plays a video game is really good at it. Aliens come down and say, "Guess what? It's real. You're going to space."
That's like Space Jam.
But don't bring up Space Jam.
That was a good movie.
That was not a good movie.
It's so bad, it's good.
Okay, so that's good. I can take. Yeah. Okay. The game of the year for 1984, though, is King's Quest. King's Quest took the adventure idea of text-based role-playing, and it was still text-based, but there were graphics. There were full-color graphics. You could move your character around. You could have fights. You interacted with people, and it wasn't just regular people. You were interacting with fantasy characters. This was a world where all the different fairy tales were true, and they're all living at the same time, just like Once Upon a Time or Grimm. And King's Quest was designed by a woman, Roberta Williams. Now, her husband Ken was a computer graphics designer, and she wanted to make a video game. So she did it basically in her spare time. And Ken realized that his wife really had something, so he helped her go into business, and she became the first female gaming superstar. King's Quest launched Sierra as a company, which made a whole series of other Quest games. They had Police Quest, they had Quest with Glory, they had Space Quest, which should be remembered now because Space Quest is awesome. They had Leisure Suit Larry, and now they're mostly known for the people that brought you like Team Fortress. Okay, we're moving up to 1985. I was stuck on what anime thing to bring up here because there's 2 really big ones. One is Robotech, 1985 debut. The other one is Studio Ghibli. Okay. Oh. Okay. Anyone from Robotech?
In the back.
Ghibli. Yeah. Okay. Good documents. Okay. 1985 was the year of the first Pictionary, the first WrestleMania, the first Bomberman, the first Gradius, Laser Tag, that most 1980s thing started in 1985. This is the year that Marty McFly went back to 1955. But the game of the year for 1985 is something from a country that's not around anymore, the Soviet Union. The game of the year is Tetris. Yes. Big ups for Tetris. Okay. There's a crazy behind-the-scenes story for Tetris. Tetris was made by a man named Alexei Pajitnov. He was a Soviet citizen, therefore he didn't actually own Tetris. He designed it and said, "Hey, this is neat." It went on the black market in what was called Samizdat, and it made it to Hungary, and then a British guy living in Hungary named, I think, Robert Stern. Imagine Hugh Grant, by the way, because this is going to be a movie one day. This is going to be a comedy movie. And you can also imagine Jack Black or Will Ferrell as Alexei Pajitnov, a big bear of a guy with a big beard, not knowing quite what's going on. So, Stern finds out, hey, there's this great video game that came out of the Soviet Union. He gets Pajitnov on the phone, sends him a contract, and says, "How does this contract look to you? I want to sell this game." And Pajitnov says, "Looks good." Now, what looks good means is, I'm a Soviet citizen, I don't own this, but this contract looks good. If you sell it to the right people, they'll probably buy it, I don't know. Now, what Stern took this as is, okay, he's saying looks good, I'm just going to sign it on his behalf, and I'm going to start selling this game. So, he starts selling the game. He sells it to Mirrorsoft, which is a UK company. Mirrorsoft then sells the rights to 2 different Japanese companies, one called Spectrum Holobyte and one that is Atari. Atari at this point has fallen into flames, and now they've cut Atari in half, and it's 2 different companies, so there's 2 Ataris. So right after they sell it to one Atari, they then sell Atari, the other Atari, another version of Tetris. And everyone who's buying this is basically buying world rights. So everyone who's bought it is now then selling their own versions of Tetris and selling subsidiaries. So there's like 5 different people trying to sell the Japanese market on a Japanese PC version of Tetris. None of them actually own it. All of them think they do. All of them have paid money to own it, but none of them do. All of this comes to a head because in a couple of years, Nintendo is going to want to put out a handheld gaming device called the Game Boy, which you've all probably heard of.